Hi, I'm David Blankenhorn. Welcome to the conversation. I'm very happy to have with me at the table tonight Glen Loury, who teaches at Brown University, Economics and Social Sciences, one of America's most distinguished public intellectuals, author of many books and articles about race and economics and public policy and many other things. And also at the table, Glen Loury II, son of old Glen, who writes about movies at just a bloody blog.
Very occasionally.
Very occasionally. And who occasionally hosts or co-hosts The Glen Show with your father at Blogging Heads TV. Welcome. I'm really happy to have both of you here.
Thank you, David. Good to be here.
I've really been looking forward to this conversation. Glen, Senior.
Sir.
One of the reasons I've been looking forward to it is that I've known you personally for a while. I've known of you for 3 decades now. And all that time, I have really admired you as a public man and as a man. And when you were in your kind of conservative phase in the 80s, I thought you had real things to say. I stiffened at the spine when I heard you talk in those days about the importance of the black community looking inward.
Yeah.
And the kind of ethic of self-help and community improvement. And when you broke with the conservative movement, I guess you might say, in the mid-1990s over the issue of race, particularly over the book The End of Racism by Dinesh D'Souza, I admired that, man. I thought that was the right thing to do for you and for the country. And I think, to me, the passage of time has made it more plain. That was an act of courage and wisdom on your part, I thought. And now that you are a man of the left politically, we can talk about this, but and have devoted yourself with such intensity to the issue of mass incarceration, the injustice and immorality of mass incarceration, even when it focuses around what you call wrongful acts freely chosen by individual persons, the immorality of that system. I think you've touched upon one of the core issues of our time, and I admire that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I'll just one other thing, and then the praise will
As it
we'll
must.
We'll do something else. But I do want to say that I believe you've stepped up in your career to the role of public intellectual. And by that I mean that you have not stood behind the protective screen of the kind of academic podium and said, I'm a numbers cruncher, I'm a technician, I'm somebody who's going to maybe provide some useful options for policymakers, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I'm really a scientist who's just reporting some data because I have special skills, academic skills. What I've liked about you is that you have brought your whole person to the task. Your personality, your values, as well as your considerable intellectual gifts. And that's what I think of when I think of what is a public intellectual, and I like that.
You humble me, David.
All right, well, it's a good start. Of course, now he wasn't my father during all this time, and I have a son exactly your age. So say a bit, maybe from your perspective of seeing your father as a public man. How does that look from your point of view?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I guess that's just been the way it is for me. Basically my entire life. My dad is...
You were born in 1990?
1989.
Okay.
And, Glen Cartman Loury, the name that we share has always been a name that is associated with, a great deal of achievements and a charisma. I don't really know.
From the time you were a little boy?
From the time that I was, very small.
You had this idea in your head that your father was a public man.
Well, I mean, one of the earliest memories I actually have in my life is we were living in Milton at the time, and I don't remember exactly what this is for, but we had all these camera crews coming to our house filming some sort of special on you and your family, and we had everybody.
Can I tell them what it is?
Yeah, by all means.
It was the 700 Club.
Oh,
Okay.
Say what
we
that
were
is.
born. This is a Christian broadcasting network program, which I imagine has mainly a faith-based audience of Christian and probably evangelical Christian.
Right.
Pat
What year
Robertson,
was the show? What year was that, Glenn?
We were in Milton. I think we moved to Milton just as Nehemiah was being born. Nehemiah was born in December of 1991.
Okay.
So this
on
would have been probably 93 or 94.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was my testimony, in effect, my encounter with Jesus Christ, how it had changed my life. It was my, I had some real terrible times in my life with drugs and with marital infidelity, and I had had public embarrassment and humiliation, and I'd recovered from that and the Lord had restored my marriage, and my family was burgeoning, and they wanted to come and tell the story, and they brought these cameras into our.
And they did.
Into our.
And
home.
you're like 2 years old or something.
I think we've been
I would
older
have been
because Nehemiah was
4
living,
or 5 at the
and
Okay.
we had the dog in the backyard, and it was
All
the
right.
whole idyllic suburban scene.
Yeah, so I would have guessed probably like 1994,
Yeah,
somewhere
yeah,
around there.
yeah.
But it's been a constant theme, that sort of thing. I remember, starting, I'm guessing in what was the late 90s when you were at BU, there was the Institute of Race and Social Division, and so we would have weekly 40, 50 people descending upon our house, having come from one of these seminars for a perfectly catered meal and a discussion in this grand kind of foyer in the living room that we had back then.
Yeah.
And Glenn's mom, my late wife, Dr. Linda Datcher Loury, would be the hostess and make those evenings possible, and we can't speak of them without remembering.
Yeah. Yeah. In preparing for this, I read a beautiful talk that you gave about your late wife a couple of years ago. And I think you ended it by saying something like, my understanding is dimmer.
The light of my understanding is dimmer, and the path ahead is unclear.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a beautiful commentary. Very beautiful. Now, also a little bit by way of biography, I'm going to read a paragraph that you wrote recently. Our topic is so enormous, our topic of, sex, marriage, race, and class. So I don't know if this paragraph touches upon all of them, but it might get us into one or two. And I'm going to read this and ask both of you if you have any thoughts about it. Glen Sr., this was a talk you gave at the Kennedy School at Harvard several months ago called The Responsibilities of Intellectuals in an Age of Mass Incarceration. And here's what you said. I'm imagining you sit the podium and the distinguished guests in the grand Harvard foyer, I'm the eldest of 2 children, raised after an early divorce by a single mom. I grew up on Chicago's South Side in the 1950s and 60s. Although the neighborhood was rough, my family was comfortable enough. My father was a high-level administrator with the Internal Revenue Service, and my mother was a secretary with the Veterans Administration. I had cousins who became doctors and lawyers. I also had relatives who died of a drug overdose or who spent years in prison. In his book, Code of the Streets, the ethnographer Elijah Anderson describes 2 broad categories of social orientation in inner cities, what he calls decent families, who tend to be working poor rather than unemployed, and who value self-reliance, hard work, education, and church. And on the other hand, what he calls street families, who turn to lawlessness to make ends meet, and violence to settle conflicts. My family had a little of both, sometimes in a single person. I'm thinking, for instance, about my Uncle Mooney. He was a legitimate small businessman, a barber and dry cleaner, but he sold marijuana out of the back of his barber shop routinely. I'm thinking of my great aunts, Cammie and Rosetta, who fenced stolen goods as a regular course of events. They had young women who were shoplifting clothing and foodstuffs from retailers, and they would get 20 or 30 cents on the dollar from my aunts, who then had big freezers in the basement. So whenever you wanted to have a family thing, you knew that you didn't go and buy your ham and your turkey from the Stop and Shop. You went to Aunt Cammie or Aunt Rosetta. These are church ladies with big hats. They were the salt of the earth, these people, but that's what they did. Why did you want to tell the people at Harvard those sentences? Why was that? Why did you decide to say that?
I'm so grateful to you for asking me that and for noticing that. I guess this was after a talk, okay? And the setting was, as you say, it was at the Kennedy School. It wasn't a podium, it was a table around the room, but and chairs, and there were 150 people in that room. They had packed in there. And they were wrapped. And I was basically chastising us, intellectuals, for the sin that you described in the beginning of your introduction, which was hiding behind the numbers and not having a kind of moral stake in the development and implementation and imposition of policy, because I was talking about the area of punishment. So when society punishes, we use force. This is violence, okay? Legitimate violence. I didn't say it was illegitimate, but it is a horrible, awesome thing, okay? And so when we criminologists write our papers and we give our lectures and we put our PowerPoints and we have our numbers, you see, but we're like cogs in this machine, of producing these outcomes. But we're intellectuals, we're in a university. Don't we have a responsibility to reflect about what it is that we do, about the power that we mask or legitimate with our numbers and with our essays and our high-blown rhetoric? We put a cloak over the thing and we make it okay. We cover the sharp edge of it, okay? And I'm here to unmask, I'm here to demystify, right? That's what the intellectual should be doing. This is kind of the theme that I'll go. So I get to the end. And I want to say one of the reasons why this is a morally fraught area is because none of us is a perfect human being, and all of us have something in us that is problematic, that is not pretty, that is, evil. Something that's...
Street, not all decent.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Certainly my biography attests to that. And so what I was doing was I was saying, when I thought about the social location from which I had come, and I thought about the ambiguity of it vis-a-vis the law, I don't believe my aunts were evil because they were doing what they were doing. They had come from Mississippi to Chicago in the years after the First World War, these women, Rosetta,
they were from
Cammie,
Mississippi.
Sarah.
What, do you remember where in Mississippi they were from?
Brookhaven. Don't tell me that's your hometown.
Jackson is my hometown.
I was just in Jackson,
but
Mississippi last week.
Brookhaven is, my mom's lived in Brookhaven for a while, and Brookhaven, yeah, right.
So that's where my mother's
mother
mother was born.
Yeah.
And her siblings, and they would have been 15 in that family, my mother's family. And I would say a dozen of them migrated to Chicago in the years between 1918 and 1930. I'd say a dozen of them moved from Brookhaven to Chicago.
You know what they call the train, They had they called it was I don't know if it was a derogatory term or not. The chicken bone special. They took the
Sounds derogatory.
the train. Well, the mass migration
Yeah, I
from
know
the
what you're talking
south
about, though.
to the north.
There's the brown paper bag with the greasy spot on the side with people that have their chicken and their bread.
Yeah, there you go.
A couple of apples.
Those two ladies came from Brookhaven, Mississippi.
They did, and maybe 8 other of their brothers and sisters all moved up to Chicago.
Yeah.
And, black folk trying to make it in Chicago in 1930.
Yeah.
I tell you, by the time I came along, I was born in 1948. Aunt Kimmy had a big, beautiful 6-flat apartment building on the south side of Chicago. How do you think she got it?
Right.
Okay? The lady was in church every Sunday. I'm not kidding. Okay?
Right.
And, she was a Bible believer. She was a good person, salt of the earth. I'm not kidding. But they broke the law. Okay? So I wasn't saying that to legitimize anything anybody else was doing. I was just trying to say that the thing is complicated. I was trying, and it was self-revelation. I've discovered that, if you're prepared to bear your own imperfections, you might induce other people to think a little bit about theirs. So I don't know. That's why you ask why. That's why.
That's really interesting. A couple of years ago, you and I were having lunch in a restaurant about 2 blocks from here, and usually, I think I'm used to talking about debating, politics and big ideas and career and so forth. But for some reason, we began talking a little bit about our own personal lives. And you said, something really powerful has happened to me. My son has just told me and his mother that he's gay, and that's a big deal for me. And I don't remember I'm not sure you remember this conversation.
I think I do.
But I can't remember exactly what you said. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what communicated to me at the time was you saying, I don't know what to do. I'm not sure what to do. Like, my religion has said to me certain things about this. I'm from a time and a place where I have certain ideas about all this. And wow, I'm not sure what to do. And there was genuine anguish in your face and in your voice. So my question is, what did you do? And my question to you, Glenn, is, what did he do?
Who should go first?
What did you do?
Well, actually, what did you say? What did you say?
Oh, I remember the day very well, because I came out to my parents about a month apart, and I did it the same way both times.
Who first?
My mom first.
Yeah,
Of course.
of course.
And so my dad was driving me to the airport, and we were going down to Providence because at this time it was cheaper to do that. And I was just building up to it the whole way. And we were pulling up to the airport, and I said, "Oh, by the way, there's something that I have to tell you. I recently discovered about myself." And I said, "I'm gay." And then we were there, and I got out and I left, so that he could sort of stew over it.
Give him a little time to process.
He could stew over it a little bit. And so I flew back to Philadelphia because I was going to college. I was going to college in Philadelphia at the time, and I got a call from you when I landed, or maybe I called you. I don't remember which one. It was which, and you asked me, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm sure. I've agonized over it for years. I know." And I mean, I didn't see you for a while after that.
You were like your sophomore year or something? Or
This
your
would have
junior
been
year
this would
in
have
college?
been January, my freshman year.
Oh, okay.
Freshman year.
Yeah. So what did you do?
Well, first, I remember the event a little differently. But I remember, certainly the particulars about the airport and, you know, waiting till you're getting the luggage out of the back of the car bit was right. And that was clearly staged. What I remember Glenn saying was, I have finally come to terms with my homosexuality. Quote.
That does.
Okay, not that I'm gay.
Okay.
And what I remember saying in response, perhaps after a shocked pause, was, it's okay, or that's okay. And Glenn saying, shooting back quickly, I know it's okay. That's what I recall from that conversation. And then not knowing what to say after that, because after all, we are getting luggage out of the back of a car for someone who's getting on a flight that's leaving in 45 minutes. And I do remember asking, as I have asked myself, many times since, is he sure? I do remember asking him that, and thinking to myself, what does it mean for someone to say that? I mean, I've had sexual relations with a person of the same sex, or I feel erotic attraction to people of the same sex. Well, that can be true, and a person can still be not gay as a type or a fixed thing. It could be ambiguous. Where's the line and how does it work and whatever, and it's all very complicated and whatever. So yes, perhaps naively, perhaps hopefully, I wanted to know if he was sure. What did I do? What have I done? I guess I would say, David, that I still, in some sense, don't know what to do in terms of my role as a parent to my adult sons, and to this one in particular. I'm just not clear what to do with my wife, their mom, having passed away tragically young. I'm not sure exactly what to do. I mean, how to be a father. And it's not just about sexuality that one would be doing whatever it is that one would be doing. Glenn is complicated, and there's a lot of things going on in his life, and I'm not always sure what to do. I thought, though, that what I needed to do in terms of my own reaction was to interrogate myself about really where it was coming from, I mean, was it like what they would call homophobia or some kind of antipathy that I was...
When you say your reaction, do you mean the reaction of distress, or the reaction of shock, or the reaction of surprise, or the reaction of I wish he hadn't said this to me, or I wish it wasn't true, or some of those things?
Well, yeah, distress or alarm, concern about the future. What does it mean? Perhaps I wish it weren't true, although that's not going to get you very far, but also about, so my father, Everett Loury, my father, who is retired now and lives in Central Florida and is 84 years old in September. I can't talk to him about Glenn's sexuality. He will not tolerate the conversation. He doesn't want to hear it. I don't like it, and I don't want, and I ain't going, nothing you can say to me about it that's going to make me like it, and whatever, like that. So he's born 1928, I'm born 1948. It's a different generation, but I'm 40 years older than my son.
Yeah.
That's 4 decades.
Yeah.
4 decades ago was not now. It was different.
Right.
So I think that I just had some work to do in terms of getting my mind around what this was and not deceiving myself about it, because it's very easy to say that it's okay. it's not so easy for it to be okay, to really be okay.
So your reaction was more looking in yourself.
Well, that was part of it, yeah, mostly. I mean, what else can I do?
To interrogate yourself, to see, do a kind of a gut check and soul check on you.
Because the question is, how am I going to live with this?
Yeah.
Right? What does this mean?
Yeah.
And if I may, I mean, he's made great strides very quickly on this. I mean, great strides. I don't know. You accommodated it very quickly. I mean, not to say that there weren't bumps, and I guess, coming out isn't something that happens all at once. It's something that happens in waves. So I tell him that I'm gay. So what does that mean? I still look like the same person. I still act like the same person. So, it's something that's just an idea at that point. But then, a couple years later, I go up to him and I tell him that I've met this guy and that I like him quite a bit. And, I bring him home. And obviously there are the implications of what's going on there. And that is another wave, because now what was just an idea has been made very real.
In your father's house.
In my father's house,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
And that was another shaky point, because he was understandably, perhaps one might say, still adjusting to that. Or now he had to make another adjustment, because now he's.
Do you mind if I ask you, what did your mother say?
Well, I told her in very much the same fashion, and she didn't really say anything. She just hugged me, and I went on my way. But by the time I had landed, she had called me and left a voicemail, very brief, that just said, "Son, I want you to know that I love you. No matter who you are, no matter who you bring home, you're still my son, and that's what matters to me. I just want you to be happy." And so that's really all she said.
Hope you say that voicemail, man. Wow.
May I add something to Glen's accurate description of the kind of various steps of progress? Because I remember how I felt about Glen bringing Rob to the house, and Glen's room upstairs, and the door is closed. And I said something about it, to the effect, I don't remember the exact words, Glen can correct me if he does remember, that I didn't want that going on in my house.
I do know the exact words. You said, "This isn't a brothel."
That is what I said. Glen took deep offense at that and called to my attention the fact that I would have never said such a thing to my other son, his brother. Were my other son, his brother, to have brought a girlfriend to the house and to the room. These kids are, they got driver's licenses, they can drink. You can't tell them not to have sex.
Right. They're adults.
I certainly can't tell them not to have sex.
That's right.
But,
he was
right. And it really was a turning point for me. It was an important moment, because he was absolutely right. I would not have ever thought to say such a thing. And I had to then ask myself, well, what's going on with me? What was that about, really? Because he's right. Yeah, so.
What is your view of the morality of homosexual conduct?
I think God is not interested in how we do it. Okay? Sodomy is something that men and women can do. You can get a vibrator. Excuse me, I don't mean to shock anybody, but
Right.
The human body is what it is, and sex is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay? Very complicated, and there are an infinite number of varieties and possibilities. I really don't think there's a whole lot of Jesus in that.
Yeah.
This is me.
Yeah.
I don't know about the theological foundation for it, so this is a human convention. It's societal convention. Our norms about some of these practices. Okay, now.
And you're speaking as well, you have many parts of you. You're speaking as a man, you're speaking as a black man, you're speaking as a man born in a certain time and place that you briefly wrote about in those couple of paragraphs. And you're speaking as a Christian, a believing Christian who's wrestled with it. Wrestled with Christian belief.
You might want to put
time.
an asterisk next to that Christian, but we could get
Born
to that.
again and born again.
Or you just might want to say, no, he's not a Christian. But we could talk about that,
right.
my faith journey and whatnot. We can talk about that,
All
but
right.
we were talking about the moral status of homosexuality.
The reason I responded was because you said you don't see much Jesus in condemnations of homosexual conduct.
Right.
Whereas the church that you and I grew up in,
Yes.
you the black church, me the white church,
Yeah.
but very similar in other respects,
Sure.
the dominant belief of that church was that Jesus did condemn homosexual, or did at least the Church of Jesus did. Maybe you're saying, well, what are you saying?
Well, and that's still the dominant belief as far as I can tell. Certainly in the congregation where I worship, I think if you were to poll people that,
Yeah.
I mean, they may show a great deal of generosity and sympathy and kindness.
Love the sinner, hate
Yeah.
the sin.
Wouldn't be
Yeah.
condemnatory in that way, but it would still be saying that, they would be saying, pray for healing.
Yeah.
This kind of thing. And, I'm going to answer as an intellectual, not as a kid that grew up in the 1960s and 50s on the south side of Chicago. I would say, the real issues are about fidelity, commitment, responsibility, things like that. I mean, now if you ask me, is there something about monogamy or about that where there's a moral claim? I say, yeah, you're making promises to people and then you're breaking them. I mean, lying is wrong. If lying is wrong, being unfaithful to somebody, now open relationship, that's a different story.
Right.
So people have an understanding about what they're doing and multiple partners and whatnot. I don't know if I want to put it in the law book,
Right.
but I don't necessarily want to say that it's violating some ethical standard. It's a different convention. It's a different way of living and of seeing. It might not be what I would adopt for myself. It may not be what I would want for my society, and then I'd have reasons about that. But I'm now talking broadly
Right.
about, different kinds of relationships between people and about the way that moral judgment enters into our assessment of those relationships. And I'm trying to say that we have conventions and rules and practices that we've grown accustomed to, which may survive for very good and sufficient reason. But the ethical judgment, the kind of, this is more immoral, this is wrong, I think it will turn on things like how people treat each other,
Yeah.
not what they, do and the
physical.
mechanics of their physical
Yeah.
thing. And so I want to say about that then that I think the moral status of homosexual conduct is, it's not really even a question. I mean, it's sexual conduct between consenting people
Yeah.
who are
Yeah.
oriented to conduct themselves sexually, such as they do.
The ethics come into the relation, into the nature of the relationships, into the love, whether the love that's in the relationship, not this part of the body touching that part of the body. Yeah.
That's how I want to answer as an intellectual. I mean, there's a lot of things to talk about here. Promiscuity.
Yeah.
What about that? What about multiple partners? What about 20? What about 50? What about?
But before we get into that,
Yeah, okay.
I want to say
Sorry.
to Glen Young, what has been your view of the morality of homosexual conduct?
That's a good question. When I first became aware that there was this fundamental difference between what I found appealing and what other people in my cohort did.
When did that awareness begin to?
I cannot remember a specific moment. I would have had to say it would have been early in high school.
Okay.
14, 15.
Okay.
I was mortified And I mean, I can't really say whether that was due to the fact that I thought homosexuality was wrong. I don't really know if I thought about it in that way, or I was just terrified of being different, which is like, the typical high school fear.
Right.
And so I sort of, for years, told myself, no, this isn't going to be. So if I sort of just hold it inside, then it'll
14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I got 5 years.
5 years
of
just holding this thing inside of me, this like poisonous.
Not telling anybody
not
about
telling
it.
A soul.
Not a priest. Not a chaplain.
No,
not
told my dog. That is the one thing I told. And I think it was going to college, or not even just going, but getting in and talking to all of these people from all over the place, people who were out, people who were in a place like me, just getting to the point where they might even think about mentioning this, people who were looking for other people, reaching out. That sort of made me realize, I'm not alone, and perhaps this isn't really as big a deal as I made it out to be. And I actually, the first time that I came out to people in a group was the very first week I got there. There was Haverford College, which is where I went to school. It was like a Quaker-based school, and so they had this very odd orientation. In a variety of ways. And one of the things that they did there was called pluralism, which is where they took all the people who lived on a hall and put them in a room together, and basically you just sat there quiet and people would speak into the space.
In the Quaker style.
Yeah, in the Quaker style, like a Quaker meeting.
Yeah.
But much more intense than I'm guessing the average Quaker meeting was. Or at least ours was. And so people were just saying all of these things, and the things that I heard really sort of made my revelation seem like a dwarf,
Right. You're just one more guy.
I'm just a guy. So after that, it became easier. After that, it wasn't really a question.
Your first week of college.
First week.
Yeah, during orientation.
Very first week during orientation.
So I remember visiting Glenn at Haverford in his freshman year during Parents' Weekend, whenever that would have been, maybe 6 weeks into the semester, maybe in October. He and his mother and I went down there. And we were visiting Glenn, and Glenn was showing us around, what to do. It was in the evening. He took us to this like pub or coffee house or whatever it was, which was, the Haverford and Bryn Mawr students. It was a poetry slam. Okay, people were getting up and reading stuff. Okay, and so this lesbian poet from Bryn Mawr gets up. I remember that she was Puerto Rican. I remember she was very good. She was angry. She gave voice to, the travails of these kids. Talking about adolescents and young adults who are gay, but, they got to deal with their parents, or they're not out, or whatever.
But this is before Glenn had said anything to you.
No, I just thought
you just listened to the poet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is a hip place. My son, he's, okay.
Right.
Because the girl was talented. And I was glad to see him in that kind of like cultural space, not about it wasn't only gay. I mean, there was other stuff going on. There was political stuff. Israel. It was, it was and they were all, in their, they're full of beans. They
full of beans.
Right.
Knew a lot.
Little did I know.
Right. Wow. What is your view of gay marriage, Glenn Sr.?
Yeah. Well, given that I'm unprepared to condemn homosexuality practice in ethical terms, it seems like I wouldn't be ready to deny people the ability to consecrate their relationships in the context of the institution of marriage. So I am for it. Now, I say that deliberately because I don't know that I would have always been for it.
You think you might not have been for it if both of your sons were straight, or if Glenn was not gay, do you think you'd have the same view of gay marriage?
No. I mean, I'd like to think, and perhaps it's true, people's views evolve. But my views as of the moment that I learned that my son was gay were such that I think it unlikely that I would have come out quite in the same place as I am now, which is
I actually want to give you more credit than that. I mean, I think you would have supported gay marriage. I just don't think you would have thought it important. I mean, you would have thought, yeah, I mean, sure, why not? But
just
it
kind
also
of as an opinion.
Why?
Right.
Just
Because it's interesting to me because you see that we see in the news and so on, as the country itself becomes more accepting of gay marriage, you see a lot of these stories. Senator Rob Portman, for example, leading Republican guy, his son says he's gay and then he's for gay marriage. And of course, famously, Vice President Cheney and his daughter. And you can pick a number of these examples. And I've heard people be critical of this. People say, well, he just loves his son, which is fine, but that's no basis to make a public policy. The fact that you want to protect your son. And on the other end, you have pro-gay marriage people, gay and lesbian leaders saying, well, there are a lot of people who need to change their minds on this, and they don't all have a gay child, so there has to be a broader, it can't just be the people who have gay children. Now, I want to ask you both what you think about this, because your father's a public man, and so in a way, that same phenomenon. But I also just want to get in a little piece of editorial before you answer, which is that I'm more sympathetic myself to this because I feel that, to me, the question is empathy, relationship. For me, I do not have a child who's come to me and said he or she is gay, but what has happened to me is through relationships with people, getting to know their lives, getting to know them as friends, that has allowed empathy to gradually break through and be interacting with fixed belief. And that has been a good process for me, and I'm glad it's happened. It's empathy for individual human beings. And if it's a child, okay. If it's a friend, okay. But I think that's a way a lot of people are changing on this issue. So I'm not, my own view, but I'm going to turn this over to you and just say, how do you understand this notion of, well, am I thinking about this in a different way because I love my son?
Well, I mean, I think that bit is right. I mean, both the supporters' skepticism about that as a foundation for real social change and the conservatives' resentment of the fact that people, I thought they were on board, but it's their kid, so now they're going to abandon what was a principal position. I think there's something kind of almost like nepotism or something that colors that. If the motivation is, at the end of the day, the reason I've changed my position is because I'm trying to protect my kid. Okay.
Well, nobody's going to quite say it that way.
No. But if that's really what I want to put that at one end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Just pure kind of self-interested. Okay, I got a kid. It'll be a bad world for him if we don't change. So we got to change.
Right.
At the other end of the spectrum, I want to say, the person who is, I want to say, it wasn't that it was my kid and I was just concerned about my kid. It was that because it was my kid and because I was confronted with it at a deep interpersonal way, I was forced to interrogate stuff, forced to rethink stuff, and have come to have a much more sympathetic or empathetic, a much more generous understanding of the conditions of such people.
I think that's the key, man.
Which could then lead to a principled shift.
Yes.
That would be intellectually and morally defensible.
Because you were driven to do what you called an interrogation of yourself because of your love for your son. But the interrogation was of you and led to you pushing yourself to think more deeply about the issue than you otherwise would have done. to me, I think that's happening a lot to people around the country because of just knowing people, not just children, but.
Tim, can I say something? If it takes us off track, we don't have. But I just want to. I'm recalling now when I was at Boston University back in the 1990s, a debate, and this was long before Glen was sexually active. A debate between Roger Scruton, the conservative philosopher, the British philosopher, very distinguished man, a great philosopher, very conservative, who was a professor at Boston University, and Anthony Appiah, who is another philosopher, a person of color. He's Ghanaian and British ancestry. He's a professor at Princeton. He was at Harvard. He's now at Princeton. These are very world-class people. It was about gay marriage, basically. It's about the moral status of homosexuality. Appiah is gay. He's been out of the closet, forever. And Scruton is Scruton. Okay, this very conservative British philosopher. And it would have been 1996, 97, something like that. And I was definitely on Scruton's side in that debate, in my mind. Okay, I'm just sitting out there. I'm this neoconservative guy. I broke on the race issue.
I was going to say that was about the time
right wing. That was right when it was happening.
Shit, you
1997.
I don't know whether you think you left them or they kicked you out, but a little of both, maybe.
We talk about it.
Yeah,
it's not the main point.
Okay, you're right.
But what I want to say was, I'm sitting there, and what Appiah is saying is basically this is the way people are. Give them the opportunity to be fully accepted in society, and the dignity of that, and the contract of marriage is an essential part of the fabric of family and sort of social structure.
But you weren't buying.
And no, because I was thinking about the bathhouses. Okay? I was thinking about promiscuity. I was thinking about anonymous sex in toilets. Okay? A stereotype, to be sure. Being gay doesn't make you go to a toilet to hook up with somebody. And on the other hand, the culture of secrecy and closeted thing that is forced on people by the fact that the society rejects who they are.
Because they're out there, sexual outlaws.
They're pushed to the margin, may be responsible in some way. And this is the argument that Anthony Appiah was making, and I wasn't buying it in 1997. Okay, I was saying, man, there's such a thing as values, right? And evidently, the gay community, quote unquote, was populated at least by large numbers of people who didn't share values that I would want to affirm.
Well, at that point,
excuse me.
At that point,
can I get some more water?
Yeah, sure. We can do that.
I just wanted to address the issue of empathy, because I've gone back and forth on people like Rob Portman and Dick Cheney. Perhaps Dick Cheney more so than Rob Portman. Coming over to the side of being for gay marriage, and the only reason that they're coming over to it clearly being because of gay relatives that they have, gay children that they have. And on the one hand, I kind of want to say, well, it seems pretty obvious to me. I don't know why it would take that specific impetus for you to realize, these are just
a gay child.
These are just normal people, and perhaps their entirely normal relationships should be codified in a way that society has chosen to codify relationships like this. But on the other hand, having a little bit of empathy myself, I realize this is not something that they would ever have cause to think about if it weren't for that. It's not something that they would have ever encountered if not for that. It's not something that is present in the society that they live in. It's not like they knew any gay people, or that they really knew any gay people before this. Maybe they had gay colleagues and gay co-workers, gay people who were around them, but if you don't really know them, if they're not family or friends or somebody that's close, you can always just hold them at arm's length.
I think that's what it is.
And consider them an other.
It's keeping people at bay as individual, complicated human beings, and you're behind a wall of belief, a kind of a fixed belief, and that belief doesn't have to interact, like your story from Chicago makes you have to interact with Aunt Cammie because there was a complicated person there, not just a belief about, I think that's what's going on, whether it's with a child or whether it's with a coworker or a neighbor. I think that's what's causing, because in 1997 or 96, whenever that debate was, the belief that you expressed was held at that point by most Americans.
Sure.
And Rob Portman and Dick Cheney, they deserve credit for that, for having empathy, for recognizing that. Because not everybody who has a gay child reacts in that way. Not everybody comes out and says, oh, I've done some soul searching and I've realized that this previous position that I've held is wrong due to me having this child, and now I'm coming out with that. Some people, they turn their child into that other. They push them outside. They bring down that wall of belief, and they say, you're not my son, you're not my daughter. My daughter wouldn't do this. And so then, and that's a real tragedy right there.
Or I love you, but.
I love you, but.
But.
None of that.
Right.
Not in my house.
Right. What is your opinion of gay marriage?
I'm for gay marriage, and I've always been for gay marriage, but the reason that I pause is because, in particular, ever since the conversation that we had maybe in late January, early February, I can't remember exactly when, previously I'd just been supporting it as an advocate of gay rights. This is a right that we don't have, and we should have all of them because we're people too.
Right.
But since the conversation that we had, and this was one thing that we were discussing that I thought was particularly interesting, is how both the gay community and the institution of marriage could benefit from being brought together in ways that they have previously have not. Because it is a stereotype, but it is also true that there has been this history, less so now, of promiscuity, of there not being relationships, of unhealthy practices sexually, personally, going on in the gay community. That's true. It's not like something that you want to say is all people engage in, but it is something that has been more likely, perhaps because they have not had access, or because society, by denying them certain rights, has sort of kicked them out of society. And on the other hand, you also have the institution of marriage, which I think it is pretty clear to say is struggling right now.
Yeah.
More than half of them are doomed to failure. So we have all of these homes that are breaking, all of these children that are being torn in many different directions. And it seems like the institution of marriage could benefit from a group of people that really, really want to get married. And so a union between the two is something that could lift both boats. And that's so since our conversation, I've been looking at it as not just an advocate for gay rights, but also as an advocate for marriage as something that's important, something that could help a society that is perhaps flagging a little bit.
Yeah, man, that's what I wake up every morning hoping.
I want to complicate the discourse here a little bit, in that there is another narrative about why gay persons might be advocating for marriage, and I know you've heard it, which is that the real issue is the normalization or legitimization of the sexual practice of same-sex, which this is not about law, this is about social custom and acceptance.
Yes.
This is about whether or not it's stigmatized.
Yes.
Okay, and this is not the same thing as the moral status of it. This is the social acceptance of it. Okay? So, do you want your kid, or do you care about your kid growing up to be heterosexual or homosexual? And many people might answer that question, I would prefer that my kid be heterosexual. They could answer that question while affirming gay marriage, while saying that there's nothing wrong with homosexuality. They just prefer that the kid, whatever. So if the agenda is to shift this issue of social judgment or normalization, the vehicle of marriage and of the debate about marriage, of the making it into a civil rights question about marriage, could be seen by critics of this process, by persons who want to hold on to the conventional,
as kind of
inherited,
using the marriage issue.
using the marriage is a kind of stalking horse or something like that for a larger thing, which is social change being promoted by activism to try to diminish a norm and
to win acceptance.
I mean, I don't want to scare any social conservatives who might watch that, but yeah, I'll admit that freely. That's part of it.
Well, because when your father said, when I said, "What is your view of gay marriage?" he said, since I'm not going to make a moral condemnation of homosexuality, why would I then deny the institution that brings loving couples together? But when I was against gay marriage, that's what I believed, what you just said. That, this is all about the push for acceptance, and marriage is like the brass ring of, social acceptance. And you just said, that's part of it. That's a big part of it. But which I think it is. But here's where I have changed. Now, maybe some of this is wishful thinking. Maybe some of this is just my own desires for things rather than objective analysis. But when I ask myself, are gay people going to change marriage, or is marriage going to change gay people? When I ask myself that, I ask a rector at St. Luke's in the Fields, a church in the West Village where most of the members of the church are gay. And since now gay marriage is legal in New York, I went down there, I did interviews, and I said to her, she's a straight woman who's the rector of the church, I said, when your congregants who are mostly gay, when they start getting married, are they changing marriage, or is marriage changing them? And she said basically a little bit of both, but mostly the latter. Participating, even for people who sometimes might have a kind of skeptical view about marriage, but this is what heterosexuals were, But what I'm seeing is that it's really what you said. It's creating an institutional structure that encourages commitment, fidelity, etc. And so I think that sexual outsider ethic that you were talking about, and that you and I both had, this is the culture of the bathhouse.
Yeah.
That culture. I think marriage is going to change it. I'm not talking about the stereotype. I'm talking about the real culture. I think marriage is going to change it more than it changes marriage. And I think that's going to be an entirely good thing for everyone.
Is it true?
Well, I mean, I would kind of want to put it a little differently, because I think, and maybe it's because gay marriage has become something that is legal in a variety of different states, that and maybe it's because, and maybe all these things are connected, it's because homosexuality and homosexual practice is something that is becoming normalized and more accepted, and something that less people care about. But people are more and more and more living openly together as gay couples. They're raising families. They're moving in next door and living openly. And you see that, one of the things that social conservatives they don't want to have happen is that they don't want marriage to be redefined. And I would argue that the definition of marriage is outdated if it doesn't get redefined, because society is changing. I mean, it's the way that we codify the building blocks of society, and those building blocks are coming in different colors now. And so just because you don't apply the label marriage to those blocks doesn't change that that's what's making up the world that we live in right now. And so I would disagree and I mean, not on a major factor. I think that it's still pretty equal that marriage is going to be left behind if it doesn't catch up to what the relationships are becoming.
Is it something that you aspire to in your life?
Absolutely.
I'll tell you, man, when you said that this is how you're thinking, that perhaps gay and lesbian couples entering into the institution could possibly be a part of a broader strengthening or revaluing of the institution. I mean, that's everything for me. I mean, that's everything for me, because while I have come to be a very strong supporter of marriage equality, understood as the right of gay and lesbian couples to marry, I went from being a very strong opponent to a strong supporter. But as I look around me in this big nation of ours, man, marriage is going down the tubes. I mean, I'm talking about straight people walking away in blue-collar America, in lower middle-class America, on the south side of Chicago where you grew up. You know, we are talking about fragmented lives and children being not the best living arrangements for children, and diminished prospects for millions and millions of kids. And so for 25 years, this is what I've been mostly committed to. And so at first I thought gay marriage was just going to be one more blow to this beleaguered institution. And my new dream, I don't know if it's an analysis as much as it's just a dream, a wish, is that welcoming gay and lesbian couples into the institution, seemingly the only group in the country that really wants to get married these days, may cause us to put the culture war behind on homosexuality and focus on making marriage achievable for all Americans who want it and need it. That's
I want to ask you a question, David. Why do you think marriage is in decline in America? Why do you think on the south side of Chicago, or for that matter in Kentucky or West Virginia Hollow, that marriage is going down the tubes? What's going on?
I'm not sure. That's the honest answer.
The reason I ask is because presumably one would need an answer to that question in order to justify the anticipation that including gay and lesbian people within the institution would have the effect of strengthening.
Well, all I can answer is that I can answer negatively by saying that engaging in a ferocious culture, all-consuming culture war over the issue of homosexuality
Doesn't do anything.
isn't going to do anything to solve that problem, and isn't even going to allow us to talk about it. And so I found myself running around being this marriage guy, and every word out of my mouth was against gay marriage. Meanwhile, the thing I really cared about, the thing that was getting me out of bed in the morning, wasn't even on anybody's agenda. So that's a negative way of answering the question. Another way is, I think you're right, there is this idealism and an authentic desire for so many these gay and lesbian couples to actually be married, not just to have the right, but to be married, and it's inspiring. Why for upscale, college-educated Americans are still continuing to enjoy the advantages of marriage. 6% of the children born to college-educated women are born outside of marriage. High school but no 4-year college degree, 44% outside of marriage. Poorly educated women, 55% outside of marriage. So south side of Chicago, 55%. White blue-collar America, 45%. Upscale America, where you guys live in Brookline, 6% or under. The class divide on marriage is Why do you think it's happening? You tell me. You're
I
the
don't
social
know.
scientist.
I am. I was about to invoke my social scientific authority to say I think it's complicated, so not to say much light. Okay, but in specific ways. Okay, so the liberation of women. Okay, I mean that is a broad change in society about the role of women. Norms, expectations, what kind of professions are, whatever, what opportunities are available, the labor market options, and the outside option.
Okay, so
this is
more fuller freedom for women.
Well, that was one thing.
Economics. And so.
That was one thing I was going. Also, the character of the men to whom the women would need to be committed in a marital relationship.
If I was
So
going
on
to
the
pick
south
one
side of
thing,
Chicago-
that would be the thing I would pick.
On the south side of Chicago, I mean, if the guy's got a criminal record, if the guy's not got a job, if the guy's got 3 baby mamas and 3 babies out there with some other woman, then maybe that's not the one you want to marry. Maybe there isn't anyone you want to marry. My mother used to say, she was a divorced woman, you can be unhappy all by yourself. You don't need any help with that. Just having a man to have a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm mentioning a couple of things. So
I think there's
society has
also
changed in those
the
dimensions.
third thing I would say is that there has been a broad societal shift to a much more individualistic understanding of what marriage is. Marriage used to be a kind of a fixed set of rules that was wrapped up in an institution that you joined, and when you joined it, you were expected through social pressure and sometimes fixed rules to conform to the rules of this institution. Yeah. You were supposed to act married, and it was very clear what this meant. Yeah. And you did it. Now, the idea is much more that marriage is the name we give to the essentially, largely question of private ordering between the lovers. And so much more easy to leave and exit. It no longer has a monopoly on childbearing and childbearing.
Are you saying in so many words there's no stigma or not any much to divorce anymore? Right. Kids aren't scarred by the fact that their parents are divorced.
Right.
And
right.
A woman who's married twice is not thought to be somehow.
Well, that when you bring when the young mom brings her baby with her to church, and there's no husband.
Yeah.
What everybody says is, "What a beautiful baby."
Yeah.
That's the change.
Yeah, it's kids or people who are no longer kids, adults my age, who have grown up in a world where divorce is normal. When I was in elementary school, every month somebody else was all of a sudden living in 2 houses now. And so people who have been growing up in that sort of environment, unlike, say, when you were coming up, now when something occurs and let's say they have a kid that they didn't necessarily plan on, their first thought isn't, oh, perhaps we should get married. It's not even something that's on the radar for a lot of people. They think, oh yeah, we have a kid. We can raise them separately. We don't have to be together. And so I know all these people. I know a lot of people nowadays who are in situations where they end up having a variety of different children spread out from different women.
See, it's the institutionality that has weakened. It's the famous Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the theologian, at the end of his life, before he was killed by the Nazis. Yeah. He said, he wrote to a couple on their wedding day, he said, from this day on, it won't be your love that keeps your marriage alive, it will be your marriage that keeps your love alive. And everything I believe about marriage is summed up in that sentence. Everything. And my worry, I think I've told you this, my worry, when my finger pointing tendency for your generation, don't you understand this, you young person? I don't think you know what the hell that means. That it will be your marriage that keeps your love alive rather than your love that keeps your marriage alive. And I just wish you did. maybe you do, but you know what I'm saying? That my critique is that conception that Bonhoeffer was saying 4 years before you were born, but I think you know what he was talking about. I think a lot of people now don't know what that even would mean. That it's the marriage that keeps the love going rather than the other way around, because marriage has an authority and an independent power as an institution to produce these good outcomes and to protect these precious human goods. Now, I know that there are some gay and lesbian couples getting married these days who seem to believe this, which makes me feel great, but
Yeah, I think.
I mean, does that make sense to you?
No,
that
it makes sense
marriage
to me,
keeps
and
the
I
love?
feel like that there's a lot of friction between the generations, because there are people of your age who are wagging your fingers down and here at us, and you're saying you don't understand the importance of institutions like marriage. You don't understand like what life is and how important it is for people who enter into something like this to stay together. And then then there are people from my generation who are looking up at you and you're saying you don't understand the world that we live in has changed. The nature of relationships has changed, and I think both of these things are true. And I think,
but when the nature,
and I don't think that we want to really listen to each other when we say that, and neither of us wants to listen to the other, because there's value in both of those things.
I think something's missing here. I mean, I think there are, I don't want to call them eternal, but I think there are things that transcend the moment, the cultural moment, and that warrant to be extolled and promoted. I'm thinking here of an essay by my old colleague from Boston University, Peter Berger, the sociologist. The essay is called On the Obsolescence of the Concept of Honor. And he's trying to explain how, at this point, late 20th century person wouldn't have been able to understand honor as a concept that flourished in previous periods of European and and other civilizations. The idea that you take your own life in the face of a certain kind of humiliation out of a sense of respect for or a sense of the unbearable character of the dishonor associated with your thing, or you die for your country.
Yes.
Okay, now I'm not advocating anything here. I'm describing something. There's a contemporary literary critic who has a book about the novel. He's I can't remember the name of the author or the book, but I know the argument. And the argument is, in the 19th century, when the novel was the novel, that had a lot to do with marriage being marriage, which is to say, everything was at stake. Okay, and the maiden who's looking for the suitor and the suitable, the drama of that, and he's saying, without understanding that anymore, you can't really write a novel. Now, of course, that's an exaggeration. Plenty of good novels are being written, but he was saying, there's a shift in the sort of elemental understandings, the kind of anchoring points, where your humanity and your dignity, your ability to think well of yourself and to carry yourself with respect amongst your peers is at stake. And I think there's something. Anyway, let me stop.
I don't disagree with any of that. I mean, but what I'm talking about is What I'm talking about is the nature of the relationships, because not the people at this table, but people of your generation are far more likely to be against same-sex relationships and normalizing them. And they hold this view that the normal relationship being between a man and a woman is one of these eternal truths that should not be messed with or tangled with. And now I'm not disagreeing with the idea that there are these eternal truths, but I'm saying that one of the frictions between our generations is that we are trying to toss out the baby with the bathwater and say that there are no eternal truths, because we don't like what you're defining as the eternal
See,
truths. And what you guys are doing is you're saying, no, these are all true. And not you guys, but what people like you're saying, and we don't want to change any of them. And so that is where people are
I'm
coming
hoping
to a
that
head.
if we can change on the issue of accepting homosexual people and couples as fully equal members of society, where their love has equal dignity and worth to the love of heterosexual couples, if that change can happen, with maybe some of us old people being kind of late to the party but showing up eventually, that could either clear the way or create a space for a broader reappreciation of the institution. For example, for years, liberals would stay away from our work because they didn't want to be seen as anti-gay. Well, what if being pro-marriage doesn't mean you're anti-gay anymore? What if that's not true? What if you can be pro-gay rights and pro-family values, and they're the same thing, or they could be the same thing? What if a world that were to come into being where there was no more conflict between the concept of gay rights and family values?
I'm thinking, I was a conservative, okay? I mean, I really, really was. And every now and then it just like...
Reemerges.
Yeah, and I realized, oh man. Because I'm thinking about Pope John Paul II. Crossing the Threshold of Hope. I believe that's the name of that book.
Wonderful book.
I was stunned by that book. When I read that book, I don't know when it was. It was at least 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. Stunned by the posing of this problem of the human condition, which is governance. Governance over passion. Okay. How do we stay in place? How do we deal with our condition? Okay, now we can call it sin, we can call it fallenness, we can put a theological wrapping around, but there can't be any doubt about the fact that we got a problem here.
Right.
Okay, keeping everything on the straight and narrow. And it can get kind of out of hand. Okay, around sexuality.
Confirming thy soul and self-control is not the simplest thing.
Yeah.
For us
So
humans.
the idea of putting it under the ruling sort of suzerainty of a kind of moral code. Okay?
Yes.
That idea is not crazy in my mind. I don't say it's inconsistent with gay marriage. I do not say that. Although if the bathhouse looms on the side, it becomes hard to see it.
Because you can uphold, in a world where gay marriage is part of the social landscape, you can tell every young person, don't have children until you're grown up and married. You can say that marrying means for keeps. You can say, and the values of faithfulness and fidelity and the responsibility for the children born into this world. People might want to quarrel a little bit with some parts of it, but I think in essence, the conservative values can be extolled in that world. I think.
And this is why
This
is why I really think, and I'm thinking it even more and more now that we're having this conversation, that marriage really needs gay people. Because the generation that I've grown up in, the vast majority of us don't care about homosexuality. We think, it's normal. Yeah. And so we see that there is this institution of marriage, which is supposed to be the be-all and end-all, the ubiquitous social building block. And then we see these people that we know and that we view as normal and who love each other and who want to create families and who cannot be a part of it. And we say, if they can't be a part of it, then it can't really be the building block of society. It can't be essential anymore.
For a whole generation, that has just been I have just felt this every day. I have felt young people and liberals who just don't want to be a part of something that carries with it this kind of stigmatization of other people. And now it's going to seem like I'm shifting gears a little bit abruptly because we're talking about sex, we're talking about marriage, we're talking about race, we're talking about class.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which ones this question gets at, but I want to just get a little Rorschach test here. I'm going to show you an advertisement that is currently all across New York's schools
hearing about
and subway system. This particular ad, this is created by the school people in New York. And it reads, Andy's showing it on the screen now to the viewers online. If you finish high school, get a job, and get married before having children, you have a 98% chance of not being in poverty. That's the ad. And this is going up in public schools, and here are these kind of unhappy looking rainbow of children whose parents presumably aren't aware of this fact. So, think being a teen parent won't cost you? Think again. So I'm asking you to look at this advertisement, and I'm asking you to imagine it in schools all across the city of New York. And I'm asking you to tell me what you think of it.
Well, the social scientist in me wants to say that's not a causal inference, that no one's going to understand what I'm talking about here, okay?
Say it though.
Okay, so here's what I'm saying.
Go ahead.
The implication of that is that the effect of doing these things will be this outcome, okay? The outcome is not being poor. The things are finishing high school, getting a job, and getting married before you have the child.
You've probably read the studies. Isabel Sawhill, Ron Askins did the studies, and
I haven't actually read those studies, and I perhaps should read them before I form a hard and fast view about the matter, but my antennae are up. The reason my antennae are up are because people are different.
You think
it may be true in the data that there's a correlation.
You think these are selection effects?
Exactly. It could be that there's selection effects is what the technical term would be, but just the basic idea is the kind of person who is able to complete high school is also able to stay in a relationship even when stuff starts getting tough to deal with.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, my instinct is to flip that on its head, because I look at that and I think it's the other way around. If you are in poverty, you are far more likely to not finish high school, not get a job, and have children before you get married. And I want to ask, is it this that leads to poverty, or is it poverty that leads to situations where that is far more likely to happen to, where you're far more likely to have children who end up in this situation?
We know that what you're saying is true. In other words, people who grow up in poverty are, if you want to use the term at risk, much more at risk for dropping out of high school and having a child outside of marriage.
And so the question I want to ask,
but your father, when he was back in his conservative days, would have said that there's another part to the equation too, which
about
is
welfare and all of that.
You just would have said that human agency matters. That in other words,
Still say that.
Look, these are actual kids going to school tomorrow. Do you want them to have in their head the idea that they, whether they're poor or not poor, whether their mother or father is this or that, do you want them to have in their brain the idea that if I can finish school...
I don't like it, David.
You don't like it?
No, I don't like it.
Neither one of you like it.
It's political. Look, poverty is a fundamental social challenge engaging the institutions of our society, okay? Let me just put the intonation a different way. All you had to do was finish high school, get a job, and get married before you had the children. You wouldn't be poor. What are you talking about? You need a program. What are you talking about? Transfer resources. What are you talking about? Investment in whatever. Don't talk to me about a piece of legislation or raising anybody's taxes.
Glenn,
just keep your nose to the grindstone.
You're talking to these kids. This is for the kids. You're not giving a speech to policymakers or whispering in the ear of the king. You're talking to 17-year-old kids
I'm indoctrinating 17-year-old kids. I mean, I haven't thought this fully through, David, but a warning bell goes off in my mind.
Wow.
Well, I mean, I don't
Neither
think
one
of
of
it.
you like
I don't.
it.
But I don't think of it as so much as being a problem of indoctrination. I think kids look at that article and they say, "So much of that is out of my control, man." If I finish high school, if I don't finish high school, it's not necessarily because I'm not smart or I don't work hard. It's because the school that I'm in does not have teachers that are capable of addressing the problems that I'm solving.
And did you ever think that about your own life? That what happens to me is kind of neither here nor there?
No, I've been very fortunate. My parents are
probably drilled into
incredibly well off. I was very well educated, very well raised. I went to a great school system. I was lucky. But it's not, those kinds of advertisements aren't for people like me. Because people like me already have that, are aware of that at some level.
Look, I want to be clear. Kids should be encouraged not to have children before they finish school and get married. I am for that, okay? But it's this poor bit, okay? So we're saying you don't have to be poor. If you do these things, you don't have to be poor. There's no way that doesn't carry the message that poverty is a result of individual action. Poverty is not only a result of what's the wage level? Did a nurse come home from the hospital with the mother, who was a single mother, poorly educated, and assist her in understanding how to raise that child?
But Glenn,
is there preschool education for these kids?
You're speaking as a social analyst as if your audience are policymakers and the people who run society. This ad is attempting to establish behavioral norms in the brains of 15-year-old kids. It's two different things, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I just question its effectiveness.
Oh, man, you guys. All right, look.
No, I see your point. You're talking to kids and, drug awareness resistance education.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
You're also talking to kids. You're indoctrinating kids. Okay, to their benefit, purportedly, and perhaps, I haven't seen the studies, but if drug awareness resistance education is effective, maybe fewer kids end up in trouble with drugs. Maybe it also generates cynicism amongst kids who roll their eyes back into the back of their heads and say, "Oh my God, just say no, really?" So
I haven't seen. I'm not sure. I've tried to look at time to time on the studies of the effectiveness of these kind of campaigns, and I think they're, I'd say, mixed at best.
I'm skeptical.
Okay. Look, we got time. One more thing I just want to say, because we've covered a long gamut of things, but we didn't really specifically talk much about the issue of race explicitly. And I just want to ask, if I'm back to you telling your parents that you're gay, and that experience and the inward looking and that whole thing that you two described, and granted this took place in an upper middle class suburb, I understand all that. Does the fact that you're black have a bearing on this story?
Not for me.
Not for you.
But I imagine that for others it may have.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not even be that race is the factor here, or that race is a factor and not that it's specifically something about being black, but that black people are, I think on the whole, more likely to be, at least of your generation, fundamentally religious at a certain level, and that it comes from that. And I do think that that's a legitimate concern, because there was...
You mean, therefore, condemnatory of homosexuality?
Yeah, because there was this controversy after Prop 8 was passed in California, because people were pointing out, if you look at the numbers as they're broken down by race, black people and Hispanic people were far, far, far more likely to vote for Prop 8 than were whites.
Yeah.
But if you broke it down even further, it was that black people who were 50 and up were way more likely to vote for Prop 8 than anyone else. And if you looked at it generationally, people my age voted along the same lines as everyone else.
Probably college-educated black young people were probably voting similar. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, their numbers were basically identical.
Identical.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, but I'm guessing that would be true. Do you think does race factor into this some way?
Well, not in any direct way. I don't
Yeah.
think, for example, Glen's race has a whole lot to do with any of this, and I don't think, no, I don't think it in any direct way. But I do think that rhetorically, symbolically, the liberation struggle or freedom movement or civil rights claims of African Americans are playing a role in the discourse of persuasion around the status of homosexuality, the legal status of gay marriage, and more generally the moral status of homosexuality. Not unlike the role that example, that sort of central example in American history of claim making has played vis-a-vis the women's struggle and women's rights movement. You make analogies.
Are you okay with that?
Well, not entirely. No, I'm not. I mean, okay with it. Okay. So,
because
this is not an arch.
The opponents of gay marriage are most definitely not okay with it.
No, I know they're not, and then some of them are African Americans who've
Right.
spoken out very sharply against. Don't make a comparison of your claims. You take Stonewall Rebellion or whatever it is, and you lay that alongside Selma.
Well,
Okay.
who was the latest person to do that in our public
President
discourse?
of the United States.
He said, Seneca, Selma, Stonewall.
Yeah, he did.
Your spine must have tingled when he said it.
I didn't like it one bit, to be
Really?
honest with you.
Really?
I mean, make your argument on your own, on its own terms. I mean,
What did you think when you heard it?
I
loved
finished.
it.
You liked it?
Selma and Stonewall. I'm sorry. Slavery. I'm sorry. Tens of millions of disenfranchised people institutionalized into second-class citizenship, and you came from Mississippi. You know what I'm talking about. Okay? I am sorry. All right? The Ku Klux Klan.
The Ku Klux Klan, who also lynched gay people.
Okay, so we will then get into
The South, that also was where Matthew Shepard was murdered.
About the South.
Colorado.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, sorry about that.
I'm from there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, this kind of atmosphere where Matthew Shepard.
Here's what I'm saying. When you appropriate something to the service of an argument by analogy, certain implicit equivalences are presumed in the appropriation. Okay? You're saying it was like this, it should be like that. There's a class of cases here. Let me talk like a philosopher for a minute. And you've just made an equivalency relationship between them. That's a moral move. That's a stand. I mean,
I've heard
the survivors of the Holocaust know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
They protect
Yeah.
the moral force of their experience from analogistic appropriation fiercely and rightly so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So don't make an easy equivalency between that. I mean, just don't. Okay, so that's my position. I regret it deeply that the President of the United States said what he said.
Really? Wow.
I thought it was a kind of casualness about something that he ought not to have done. But I get it because politically,
I mean, I disagree so much with that.
It's getting interesting.
In like every single way. And because, I mean, I'm not... I mean, I want to say that what I'm disagreeing with, because I don't disagree with the fact that, I mean, it's... What I want to say is I don't know how useful it is, how useful this conversation is. Did black people suffer more than gay people? Did gay people suffer more than Jews? Whatever. I think we're missing the point entirely. It's not about, are these struggles equal to each other? Are these the same type of struggles? Do they belong in the same group? And I would say yes. Magnitude isn't important.
You said is or is not?
It's not important.
Yeah.
Are these the same kind of struggles? Are Selma, Seneca, and Stonewall the same kind of struggles? Yes. And in that sense, yes, they deserve to be grouped together. 100%, absolutely. And that is why I am so glad And I'm not glad about a lot of the things that this president does, but I was so glad that he did that because it just sort of represents the sea change that we have had here. That the president could say that without fear of being denounced or being crippled, although I guess he kind of has been, but for different reasons.
I'm sorry, you've forgotten that this was a president who wasn't for gay marriage until he was against it? I'm sorry, he was against it before he was for it?
I haven't forgotten that. I'm not forgiving him for that. I'm not forgiving Rob Portman for being against gay marriage all these years. I'm not forgiving Dick Cheney for being against gay marriage all these years. That people are taking a long time and dragging their feet over something that ultimately isn't that bad or even that important.
I'm with you. The magnitude is not the issue. It's whether or not these can be compared as certain kinds of struggles for equal dignity. And I'll also say that the fiery way that you answered that makes me realize why your name is Glen C. Loury. So,
okay, I want to add something though. I do. Okay.
that was good, man.
Maybe I should just leave it at that.
No, go ahead.
I started making a distinction in this discussion between the moral condemnation and the social opprobrium that might attach to homosexual practice. Okay, and I said, societies have norms, and the norms change. Okay, now I'm going to ask this question. Is the norm in a society that looks askance at homosexual practice, at sodomy and same-sex sex, and stigmatizes it, and turns its nose up at it, and regrets it if it happens to their kid? Okay, so that's a social norm. Okay, and then I take another social norm, that people of African descent in our society are less than fully human, that they are unfit to be a part of the civic community, that they are appropriate objects of derision and public humiliation, etc., etc. Associated with, an institution of child slavery and so forth. But I mean, the social norms that build up around it. Okay, I won't go on very long about this. I don't think those things are the same thing at all. And let me put it this way. I think that a society, the norms may change, is entirely within its right, as it were, to develop its own understanding about what practices it will and it will not condemn. Those views may change. They may change under the pressure of reason and under the pressure of changed practices by people. But we do have rules, after all, about a lot of stuff.
I used to think that was right, and here's why I now think it's wrong. Maybe I'll change again. The reason I think it's wrong is that the racism was an attack upon black people for who they are. Who they are. The attack against homosexuals, the denigration of homosexuals, the outlawing of homosexual practice, the stigmatization of homosexual persons and conduct is not a condemnation of a lifestyle choice or a particular choice of a person to do A versus B. It is a condemnation of who they are. Who they are. Therefore, it belongs in the same category of the condemnation of black people for who they are.
I mean, you get hung up. We've had this conversation before on whether or not these these two social stigmas that you were talking about should be held equal. And I mean, and you could well be right. I'm not disagreeing with you. Is the idea that people based on the color of their skin can be bought and sold worse than the idea that people based on who they love should not be allowed to be a part of society. Is that worse? I mean, probably. I don't know. But honestly, when it comes to something like the president including them in his speech, I don't think that that's really important. I mean, what's important, like David Blankenhorn is saying, is it the same type of struggle? I mean, is what gay people fighting for as essential as being considered human and being allowed to go where you wish and call yourself what you wish? No, not. No, obviously not. But is it going in the same direction towards two groups of people asking for freedoms that they do not have, which is what they're both doing?
I would say, to me, it's the question, and I've struggled with this, and this is what I've changed my mind on, because a critique of homosexual conduct is that some people like to wear certain colored ties, and some people choose to live in one neighborhood or another, and some people choose to commit sexual acts with persons of the same sex. And I'm free to not like people who wear certain ties, and I'm free to not like people, and I could have reasons actually for not liking people who choose to do something of a sexual nature with another person that I disapprove of. But what I've come to believe is that homosexual identity is a part of its identity. You know, John Corvino was here a couple of weeks ago, a gay writer, and he said, when people tell me, John, I really like you, but I don't like your homosexual lifestyle, he said, well, gee, I wonder what would happen if I went to my parents and said, Mom and Dad, you know, I really love you, but what I really disapprove of is your heterosexual lifestyle. Meaning, like, that you live together, that you hold hands, that you've made a life together, that you love one another. I love you, but I really don't like that heterosexual lifestyle. In other words, he's saying that would be a fatuous thing for me to say, because I'm talking about who they are. Now, I used to believe this other thing, but because of my own self-interrogation, that was probably not as rigorous as yours, but I had to undergo it for different reasons. I came to believe in this notion that it's the identity that's being attacked, not a choice of behavior, which I think makes it analogous to race. But I do also agree with you, and I note the passion in your voice about the historical specificity of the black experience. And I mean, yeah. But I do.
And there is also, and this is now a separate point, so we close that.
Yeah.
The conservatism in the religious traditions of the African American church, not all that dissimilar, I would imagine, from white evangelical churches in this respect.
No, I don't think so.
They read, Deuteronomy in a particular way. They read Paul in the New Testament in a particular way, And, unlike my son here, they don't think of Paul as some kind of closeted homosexual or...
No, I don't think he was a closeted
neurotic, whatever, or...
I think he was... I mean, I don't want to turn this into a
anyway,
theological
we don't have to argue
discussion.
about Paul. I just want to say, in the black community, there is, in regards to homosexuality...
That's why I wanted to bring up the thing, and I think it's maybe more relevant for people your fathers and my age than maybe for you, but I do wanted to close out by at least allowing the two of you to say anything you want to say about the race issue. And we have, I am just absorbed by this conversation, and we've gone way over our time limit, and so I really want to thank both of you guys a lot for being here, for putting yourself out there in a very way to let other people see you and the relationship between the two of you, which is really wonderful to see. It's been wonderful for me to see.